Hello and welcome to Classic Game Club. This is the show where we go back and watch old matches. It's like a book club except for sporting events. This week we are looking ahead to Bayern Munich versus Chelsea in the Champions League by looking back to Bayern Munich against Chelsea in the Champions League. The last time they played one of the most famous Champions League finals, it was 2012. It was Didier Drogba levelling against Bayern Munich in normal time before scoring the winning penalty for Chelsea. It's a very memorable Champions League final. We've watched it back this week, available on Daily Motion for you if you want to watch it back yourself. Stephen Doyle, you're very welcome.
Hey, Owen.
Colin Boohig, you're very welcome.
Hello.
So, this week, obviously, fairly busy in terms of sport. We managed to squeeze in a period in our lives. I think you were up to like 4 or 5 a.m. last night trying to get all this in. Was it worth it? It
was really worth it. And as we've had before with some of these classic game clubs, I think you find you've kind of forgotten about some of the interesting stuff leading up to the game that kind of set the scene. I suppose the big one was the suspended players and the appeal by the International Players Union to UEFA to try and get, some of these players playing, like the likes of Ivanovic, Ramirez and Raul Meireles from Chelsea, Bad Stuber, and I can't remember who the other one was from Bayern Munich, Alaba. All yellow card. Of course, John Terry was suspended, but that was a red card. So we'll I'm sure we will touch more on JT later on. But one of the other interesting stories I thought was I totally forgotten about was the fact that Ribery had decked Arjen Robben in the semi-final at half-time against Real Madrid. They had it coming together in the dressing room, and Ribery was fined 50 grand by Bayern Munich. And I think almost watching the performance of the two players, it was nearly a good thing, really. It kind of motivated those two players, I'm sure, really.
You definitely wouldn't have thought it. It's interesting that that's the things that come to mind for you. Like Terry, obviously, is the thing that comes to mind for me. For you, Colin, when you think 2012, before rewatching the game, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Where I watched it.
Right.
Which was in the Old Oak pub on Oliver Plunkett Street in Cork City, because I watched both back-to-back Champions League finals with Bayern Munich in the same pub at the exact same spot,
right.
2012 and 2013. And I remember there was this palpable feeling, even though Chelsea were more or less universally hated, especially at the time because they were still a moneybags team in England, that Bayern in this part of the world were still seen as like the baddies, basically. So there was, even in the pub that night, besides any Germans that were in the pub that night, there was kind of a feeling that people were veering towards Chelsea. And then watching it back in research, because it's the first time I've watched it since that night in full, I cannot believe Chelsea won this match.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
It was so one-sided. It was like a classic Football Manager game.
It really
that usually happens to you when you're the user.
Exactly. It's like, how did we manage to lose this cup game? And then, you've got people complaining to you, stupid players and stuff coming to the manager and all that. Exactly. I had that thought myself. Where were you watching it?
I actually watched it in a more strange place than Colin. I watched it at the home of rugby. At Twickenham. Yeah. I happened to be I was on the beat still for my old station. I still am, 98 FM, for Leinster. I was covering the Leinster-Ulster Heineken Cup final. And we ended up, myself and a few of the Irish journalists on the beat, ended up watching it in
Twickenham,
in the press room. Yeah. It was actually quite interesting. But it was a really fascinating night. Just kind of, and it was just strange. It was like, here I am, the home of rugby, Twickenham. What am I doing here watching one of the most intriguing Champions League finals?
I was half thinking coming in today that I was like, I bet you Steve-O covered it. I bet you he was at it. He's just gonna trump everyone here,
Not many people, I would say, not many genuine fans outside of the very few lucky people managed to get into this stadium, I dare say. Like, when you look at the trophy presentation at the end, it's like, well, this is really underwhelming. Everybody's there with like lanyards, digital cameras, still.
That's funny. It was the transition, But there was still a sea of blue. I actually forgot how prominent the Chelsea fans were behind the opposite goal to where the penalties took place.
And to remind people as well, it was in the Allianz Arena, of course, in Munich.
Yeah.
And interestingly, no team had won it on their own patch since Internazionale in 1965. That was the last time it had been done. And I think, looking at the two teams on paper and the suspensions and all that kind of stuff in the build-up, I think everybody thought it was going to be done again. The home team winning on their home patch.
Without question. So let's just give the wider context here. Obviously, Chelsea had won absolutely everything at this point. This was very similar to how Manchester City currently are. Roman Abramovich needed the Champions League. This was a very personal thing for him. He gets mentioned tons of times in commentary, and he's shown quite a bit after they lift the trophy. Second ever Champions League final appearance for Chelsea. Obviously before that, 2008, it was the slip Drogba sent off in that game, so didn't actually get a chance to take a penalty, so that leads to the whole redemption narrative in this as well. Overall, on the domestic front, poor season for Chelsea. This was the AVB era. He was sacked in March. Di Matteo is in on an interim basis. I think Clive Tilsley makes a jibe after the match that perhaps he should just be kept permanently interim, because the interim might be the thing that's actually doing him all these favours. Obviously, as you mentioned, Terry was suspended, Ivanovic was suspended, famously told by Jeff Shreves, wasn't it, in the semi-final that he will
not be playing in the final. Just to repeat, he will not be playing. It's heartbreaking.
And Di Matteo, of course, everybody remembers, and maybe me more so than you guys, but it remembers him scoring that amazing goal at Wembley in the FA Cup final against Manchester United so many years before. So he was a real Chelsea man as well himself. Like, even though he just come in as on an interim base, he was Chelsea to the core, really.
I think his legacy is damaged by what happened afterwards. I think in 2012 people had a lot of time for Di Matteo. I think people felt he was genuinely screwed over afterwards when he was fired by Abramovich later in the year, because that's essentially what happened. Like, just to go to things like Morelos, as you said, was suspended. Then on the Bayern side of things, they'd beaten Real Madrid on penalties in the semi-final. You'd Badstuber and Alaba missing on suspension for them. And then, like, you look into the team sheets, and I totally agree with you. When you look at the teams here, this is I would say a heavy favouritism for Bayern. Like, you look at their back line, even with Boateng and Lam, although you have Timashuk in at centre-back with them, and Contento, who I thought did fairly well during the game at left-back, but far from a heralded full-back, playing with Fortuna Dusseldorf at the moment, still only 29 years of age. But then you look in front of that. Schweinsteiger and Kroos in midfield, Robin and Ribery obviously on the wings, Muller as a number 10 behind Mario Gomez. Then for Chelsea...
Sorry, just to take Gomez, then of course we all know the only player who scored more goals than him in the Champions League that season was Leo Messi. He was on, what did he score?
9 and 11, was it? No, 12 and 11, was it? 13 and 11. And he scored 41 and 51 that season, or something.
I think
something
it was 13
outrageous.
and 11 starts, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's what it was, yeah.
And he scored against Real Madrid in the semi-final second leg too, Gomez. He was prominent. And also, Thomas Muller probably wouldn't have started that match if Gustavo was available to play, because then Kroos could have moved further forward. So it was Gustavo and Schweinsteiger with Kroos going up to the 10. So Muller went to 10, Kroos pushed back to with Schweinsteiger. Yeah. So now it was a better team on paper, but up to that point they were going with Gustavo. So
and also as well when you hear the commentary talking about Muller when he scores his goal, it's like 2010 was a decade ago. It's like he's finally finding his form of that World Cup in 2010. It's like, God, you kind of forget how quickly, well, maybe he had a good season after that, but how quickly Muller's profile sort of nosedived after the World Cup in 2010. This was such a high moment, and he definitely levelled off a little bit to the point where, as you say, if Bayern had everyone available, he might not have started the Champions League final. The Chelsea team, very quickly, just to run through it, was Cech in goals, Basingua and Cole as full-backs. We'll get into that in a moment, because I think that's very interesting. Louise and Cahill at centre halves. You've got John Obi Mikel and Frank Lampard in midfield, Juan Mata just in front of them, Kalou and Bertrand. Ryan Bertrand starting his first Champions League appearance. 150 Football League appearances, as we're reminded, but never a Champions League appearance until the final.
And the previous time that Chelsea were in the final 4 years earlier against Manchester United, Ryan Bertrand was on loan at Oldham Athletic.
Wow.
And then he plays, it was like Chris Baird, I think, played for Southampton in the FA Cup final in 2003, the Northern Ireland International, and that was his first senior appearance at Southampton. And they lost that game 1-0 to Arsenal. But afterwards, like, Baird was looking at his medal like, this is amazing. And all the other Southampton players, he's like a fan who wanted the competition.
I don't need to complete the team there. Didier Drogba led the line for Chelsea that night, his last appearance for Chelsea. Anyone want to start anywhere in terms of the early stages of the game? We're going to get into the moment of the match. Is there anything you noticed?
Definitely, straight away. I don't know about Steve-O, straight away. Very, very first minute, Ashley Cole should have been sent off. Very, very first minute.
Robin, is it?
On Tony Kroos.
Oh, sorry, on Kroos.
So Cole, I think it's the first time a Chelsea player touches the ball, or of note certainly, picks it up in his traditional left-back position, tries to drive forward, overruns the ball, and Kroos comes and intercepts. He goes on top of his ankle. I think it's just a free kick. Maybe he got booked. I don't have him down as being booked.
No, because he gets booked later in the match.
Yeah, he gets it later. If that was now, they would call for VAR. Very likely. He probably would have been booked because it was the first minute of the final, maybe. Could have been sent off.
Yeah, it was. I do have it down here in my notes, almost straight in, leaving a marker in. I think it was a yellow card. I'm not sure was it a red card myself. Schweinsteiger gets booked then straight away for a handball. Like, I thought once Cole goes in, I'm like, I don't remember this being a filthy game. Like, I was right. It wasn't much about it, but I thought this was we were in for a corker here on second viewing.
Yeah, and also because Ashley Cole had a fantastic night that night, and he had the really tough job of marking Arjen Robben. And of course, the reason Bertrand started was they felt that he could give cover to Cole, because you had Philipp Lahm on that side as well for Bayern Munich, who, as we all know, was brilliant attacking as he was defending. But in the 8th minute, Robben had his first chance, the classic trademark Arjen Robben move, cutting in his left foot, having the shot, and he blamed it over the bar. And I think that also set the tone as well, because Robben, you know, he created chances for himself, but he was off that night. And we'd seen before from Robben in a World Cup final, he had a chance to score for the Dutch and try and win that final. He bottled it. And he had a couple of there was other big games he was involved in. Actually, I think previously against Dortmund that season, he had also had chances to win games. And Dortmund, of course, won that league that season.
And hammered them in the cup final.
And that's the other thing as well, which we had mentioned. They beat them 5-2 a week beforehand. So Bayern Munich you were kind of wondering psychologically, you know, were they going to be able, you know, over the 90 minutes to try and come up with something to try and beat Chelsea, because Dortmund had the better of them over and as well, I think Clive Tilsey mentions in the commentary that this was the first time in 2 decades that they possibly could be without a trophy 2 years back to back. So, but going back to Robben, as I said, it was just Cole was kind of, I think he put that marker in, obviously with Kroos in the first minute, but then also just he was showing that he was able to maybe not dealing with Robben in that situation, but maybe just kind of letting them know he was there, maybe putting them off slightly.
It's interesting that we saw Robben and Ribery overload the left flank at times. Is that testament to Ashley Cole? Or is that just looking at Jose Bazinga and saying you're not Ashley Cole?
Yeah, but sure, Jose Bazinga actually had a good game.
Really good game.
Actually, he was a player I really admired back then. He was such a tough player to play
He had a
against.
Champions League winners medal, let's not forget.
He was one of only 2 players in both squads to win the Champions League going into that game with Porto in 2004, and the other player didn't get off the bench, Paulo Ferreira.
And a real hard man as well. Like
he was really, but he made so many crucial interceptions that you'd actually go unnoticed if you were just watching it casually in that match that night. And it was his last ever game for Chelsea. He went to QPR.
Yes, straight after.
And then he basically just threw it, like he just went to QPR for the money and just threw it in, and you could see him just going through the motions because they had a disastrous season at QPR, but he was probably like, my job here is done, like I just won the Champions League with Chelsea, 2nd Champions League winners medal.
If you had to pick a moment of the match, we'll kick off our awards here. What are you going for?
Go on, Colin.
I'm going for Drogba after being the hero with the equaliser, giving away the penalty at the start of extra time, because the moment for me was like, it's done. And watching it back last night, researching it has it's such a feel of a final. Everything about it is so tense. And when he fouls Ribery, you can just see again, he used the word palpable. Everything that changes, and it's on the Chelsea fans' end as well, and you can just see everyone just like, oh no. It's one of those ones, oh no, and Drogba was like, no. And I did a documentary since, and Drogba was like, oh yeah, it was a penalty. It was the stupidest tackle I've ever made. It was definitely a penalty.
And the thing was, he didn't have to, because Cahill was actually standing in front of.
It was such a forward tackle, to use the stereotype, but he did not have to at all.
Yeah.
But he actually injured Ribery. Ribery went off as a result of that. And he, like Ribery, again, to go back to the Robben rivalry, I'd say Ribery played a big role in Robben missing that penalty, because he stayed on the pitch and wouldn't go off for about a minute. They tried to get him off.
Actually, it was about 3 minutes, I think, between the foul and the penalty.
Robben must be thinking, like, 2 years earlier, World Cup final, 3-1 goal. It's like, oh, I can't do it again. And it's not a bad penalty.
Yeah.
But Petr Cech,
it's not great.
Petr Cech on the flight over to Munich had watched every single Bayern Munich penalty since 2007. So he knew exactly, or he had a fair idea that Robben, when he's under pressure, will go what's safe to him, which is a really hard penalty, low to the right side because he's left-footed. And Cech said, that's what I would have done because I'm left-footed. So he just guessed that way. That was a moment for me.
He also did say Robben is fairly unpredictable in his penalties, and apparently another person who deserves credit in this is John Obi Mikel, who goes up to Robben and starts talking shit to him, basically.
Really?
You're going to miss this.
I didn't notice that.
He does, but Robben has never mentioned that in the aftermath. I'd say it's one of those moments where people are chatting at you and you don't even notice. I think sometimes the kind of yapping at somebody doesn't actually have as big effect as, say, Ribery lying on the ground for ages and you're like, come on, let's get this over and done with.
It's funny you mention John Obi Mikel, because as we were talking about the teams on paper, you know, Bayern looking better, they definitely look better in midfield. But I actually thought, especially in the first half when you watch it, I thought Kalou and Mikel especially, and obviously Lampard was playing quite deep as well, that they're up against like Toni Kroos and Schweinsteiger, two of the best German midfielders of all time. But I thought as the game wore on, after about 30-40 minutes, and especially because Chelsea started coming into the game towards the end of that first half, and I just thought those two players in particular really started to get a bit of confidence. They're kind of thinking, right, we can actually go toe-to-toe with these guys. You know, we're not that much inferior. And I thought that was a key part of it as well, that those two midfielders in particular, because we know Lampard's a great player anyway, but Kalou and John Obi Mikel, I thought their confidence grew as that match wore on. I think the save, you mentioned quite rightly, the overloads on the left-hand side. That's where we saw that shot from Robin, who came in off the left that time. And Cech saved it with his foot, come off the post. And Cech had a brilliant night. I think he was man of the match by the fan. I think he was voted by the fans.
Yes.
Drogba got the official UEFA. But that save in particular, maybe, I thought that was a key moment, because, now I wouldn't say the moment of the match, I'll come to that later, but I thought Cech saving that kind of, he probably was like, right, I'm full of confidence here now, you know. It's after saving that one with his foot, obviously came off the post and went out.
He was such an imposing figure, even with the ball from kickouts. You just knew that he would find the very hair on the head of Didier Drogba that he was going for each and every time, and I don't think he gets enough credit for that. People are like, he just hoofed the ball down the field. Now, Chelsea did resort to hoofing eventually in the second period of extra time. I think Cech was immaculate during that game. It was fantastic.
According to John Terry, Petr Cech had a very good feeling going into that final when compared to 4 years earlier, because when they went over to Moscow for the final against United, Cech was really annoyed that everything was red and white. All like the match programmes like prominently red and white, and the banners and the badges, and the official merchandise around that season's Champions League. And then he said the opposite effect when he went to Munich, that he said everything's blue and white, lads, this is going to be our final.
There you go.
So then he had such respect in the dressing room. He was there a long time. I think he signed in 2004, so he obviously would have been one of the core group that you always talk about, the core group at Chelsea, and he was one of them when they were brilliant. So he instilled that positivity that rested him, but they were just so up against it. I mean, it's encapsulated by the fact that Ryan Bertrand started, and Roberto Di Matteo, this basically permanent interim manager who was the most bizarrely fascinating managerial career when you look at it, was in charge of that night as well.
It really is.
It never happened again.
What have you gone for your moment of the match?
Well, my moment of the match was, it came after the Bayern Munich goal, and I thought taking Muller off for Van Boyden. I know, listen, I know the great teams will, when they feel they have a match won in the closing minutes, will make those changes where they might bring on a defensive midfielder or a centre half just to shore things up. But I just thought that Chelsea were there for the taking, and if there was just a one little sniff of a chance that you might get in the last couple of minutes to kill the game off, Gomez, his head wasn't there that night. He had a poor night. He missed so many brilliant chances, and I thought Muller was the man to leave on, because if there was going to be a fox in the box, you wanted to take one of those opportunities that might come late on when Chelsea were starting to wane, when the focus was, because it was really hot that night as well, and you could see that was affecting Chelsea. I just thought it was a massive mistake for Jupp Heynckes to take Muller off and to bring Van Boyden on. I think he should have left him on. I think he maybe should have brought off Gomez or make some other substitution, but I actually thought that was a turning point, because Bayern Munich did have a couple of opportunities well in extra time where if you felt Muller was the man in the box, that he would have killed the game off.
The other thing too, Van Bouten hadn't played a senior game for Bayern since January, so he was thrown into this final, and he had played a reserve match for Bayern only 8 days earlier. So he was probably as surprised as anyone that he was coming on. But I agree with Steve-O completely. They immediately made the substitution, didn't they? Or it was virtually straight after.
Yeah.
And also, it's a good discussion that's the moment of the match, because immediately after Bayern score, Robin has a half chance to make it 2-0. He gets half a yard in the box. Cahill loses him for once, but he scuffs the shot straight into Cech's hands. Obviously, if that goes in, it's game over and they celebrate. But Jupp Heynckes was under massive pressure going into this game, because it was a poor season for Bayern. They lost the league to Dortmund, got hammered by Dortmund in the cup final. It actually mirrored Bayer Leverkusen's season from 2002 when everything went badly for them at the end. They lost the final, Champions League final to Real Madrid, lost the German Cup final to Schalke, I think, lost the Bundesliga very near the end. And Heynckes hadn't won a major trophy since 1998 with Real Madrid, and they sacked him after that anyway, because he was so far behind Barcelona. And he was kind of a journeyman, kind of like Germany's Claudio Ranieri. He was managing several teams and then got this second chance. He had previously managed Bayern, didn't he, in the 80s, was it? Or a long time before that. And he got this almost like a stopgap, a bit like Di Matteo, but much more renowned. And it wasn't, of course, until a year later that he made up for it and got the treble. But this night, it was such a choke. It was such a choke. That's the way I would see it anyway, that They should have won this game 9.5 times out of 10.
I think this game is bigger than a match. It's bigger than a moment, and the moment of the match for me is John Terry.
Okay.
The John Terry full kit, tape.
And he's proud of
pads,
it too, to this day.
Proud of it. It's the first real football internet meme we had. This has legs that still go. When anybody is, like, in any walk of life, any sport, if you've got an under 14 competition and the kid walks on in full kit and is celebrating despite not playing, John Terry. No matter what sport it is, John Terry. This specific thing is John Terry, full kit guy who walks on not being part of the squad.
Did that resonate with you personally straight away,
Yes.
or was it because it built momentum generally?
No, straight away.
Because I remember watching it being like, I was in that pub and I was like, oh yeah, that's fair enough, because he was huge for them. In the first leg against Barcelona in the semi-final, he was immense. Obviously he did stupid thing in the second leg, hit out Alexis Sanchez sent off. But what I love about John Terry is he's doubled down on it. And
yeah.
I think Jeff Shreves asked him afterwards in another documentary, do you feel like you deserve your winner's medal? And he was like, oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
But he deserves his winner's medal.
Yeah.
But does he deserve
Does he deserve to put tape on his shin pads?
When that was happening, who was the voice that we were all hearing in the back in the analyst booth? It was Roy Keane.
Roy Keane, what was he saying?
Think back to when Roy Keane won that. Well, he didn't actually say anything about it, but I'm just hearing Roy Keane's voice.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of him and Scholes in '99 when they were both suspended for that final.
Yeah, they had to be
They had to be dragged out of the dressing room in their suits. And I was thinking, I would love to know what Roy Keane thinks of John Terry right now.
John Terry afterwards, he said, I think it was the right thing from UEFA to let the guys be involved. Not just myself, but the other boys who missed it through bookings. If that had been taken away, that would have been really hard to take. And the last thing you want to see is players in suits. We've all played a major part, so we decided to wear our kit and hope for the best. You're right, the last thing we wanted to see was you in a suit, John Terry. This is how the trophy presentation goes. So Lampard and Terry lift it together, then Drogba lifts it, then Drogba brings it over to Roman Abramovich to lift it, and then after a period of time Terry gets his hands on the trophy himself, but then he stands on the railing in his full kit and goes full hog lifting it, and that is the moment it becomes the internet meme. That's the moment when I'm like, what the hell is this?
No, the moment is when Drogba scores the penalty. The camera pans to the bench and everybody runs over, and as everybody's running over all the subs, John Terry's undressing to go into the full kit.
So that's my moment of the match. I think it just has legs and it will never be forgotten as long as we live. John Terry in full kit, a moment of the Champions League. Right, secret man of the match. We've already mentioned that Drogba was the official man of the match. I'm going for David Luiz.
Yeah. Yes.
David Luiz is excellent.
Really good. And he was injured going into that match.
Gary Neville had previously described him this season as a player who plays as if he's controlled by a 10-year-old in the crowd on a PlayStation. And it kind of blew up in his face a little bit because I thought he was excellent. Like, he was shepherding Muller quite a bit. Thought on the ball he was brilliant. At times, though, when Chelsea were trying to pass the ball around in extra time, he just hoofed the ball and was really stupid. But I think overall, especially given John Terry was suspended, I thought he had an exceptional game.
I am going to disagree, and I'm going to go for his centre-half partner.
Right.
Gary Beckenbauer Cahill. My God, some of the marauding runs he made in that game were just incredible. It was like it was actually kind of like nearly like that John Terry was telepathically controlling Gary Cahill in that match, because it was like he became John Terry. He was like...
That's true.
But there were moments that game he was just marauding forward. I thought he made some crucial blocks. Now, I actually thought it was his presence there that kind of helped David Luiz, that gave him that extra security to play well. I would go for Gary Cahill. So yeah, he would be my.
And he was with Bolton as recently as the January.
That's right.
So that's the step up that he was going. I was thinking that he was training.
It was
with
not
Bolton.
a summer transfer.
No, January 2012.
Was it?
Yeah.
I thought it was a summer transfer. Who have you gone for?
I'm going with John Obi Mikel.
Yeah, good shout.
Because he was never the most celebrated. He came with a huge reputation because, of course, he actually had signed for Man United, and then Chelsea came in and took him when he was very young. And he played a lot, but people were kind of a bit underwhelmed by him. And I think even immediately after that final, people weren't talking about Mikel. But certainly watching it back last night, he had to basically do the job of two people. He was like an original N'Golo Kante, because his midfield partner was Frank Lampard, who only knows one way, and that's going forward. And bear in mind that Mikel was up against Schweinsteiger, Kroos and Muller. He had a lot of work to do. He wasn't always brilliant, but I mean, this was a incredibly defensive display by Chelsea. So you couldn't give it to any of the attackers. I mean, Mata was very lively, but he didn't do an awful lot. Same with Drogba. Kalou, I thought, was pretty anonymous. Bertrand was very peripheral. So you would definitely lean towards the defenders, but I thought Mikel was extremely disciplined. If he wasn't in the team, I think that would have been no contest at all. Like,
let's move on to trending. We want to start with you this time, Colin. What have you got
for trending?
Yeah.
I think still not having VAR then was a big thing.
I did notice that as well, in fairness.
And I think because I was thinking that's going to go to VAR. And I thought actually, because Bayern had the ball in the net in the 54th minute, Ribery passed it in, and he was actually just marginally offside.
Yeah,
but it was totally accepted. He was offside straight away. But
and Tower should have got a penalty in extra time.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
Shocking decision. What have you gone for?
German football. Just I think that I always loved, and I suppose specifically Munich, but Dortmund you can throw in there as well, and since then the likes of Eintracht Frankfurt. But just the atmosphere at German grounds just seems, those European, I know we talk about special European nights at the likes of Parkhead and Anfield and that kind of thing, but there really isn't, especially because most of us watch these games on TV, there's nothing as spectacular looking as those German games, those German matches and those big European nights in German stadiums. It was just amazing. I've
gone for big nines. Mario Gomez and Didier Drogba. I like that. You know, I think we're obviously seeing a bit of it this season with Leipzig and Schick, isn't it? The big nine that they have. And I think I feel that that's a small bit of a throwback. I think that we've had a different variation of nines, obviously coming from false nines, the Mandzukic / Benzema sort of nine that we see at this level of the Champions League. So I kind of like that. I thought it was a bit of a throwback.
Also, the playing out from the back was in its infancy. Because there was a period in I think it was the second half, where Bayern tried to play it out of the back, and the ball went to Jerome Boateng, and he was like, "No, I'm not doing this." He just hoops it away because Drogba was on his heels.
Yeah. Can I mention something as well that kind of bugged me last night watching that was Andy Townsend's co-commentary.
I watched this guy's sports version.
No, but there's one particular moment. It was the goal. It was the Muller goal, and he said, "Yeah, it's a scruffy header." Now, if you watch that header, the one thing that any young striker will be told is hit the ball into the ground, whether it's a kick or a header, so it'll bounce up and over the goalkeeper's head and make the save much harder. That was a magnificent header from Thomas Muller.
Yeah.
To actually make contact with it the way he did when he came in, and to have the nous to hit that off the ground so it would bounce up high through Czech's arm. I thought it was a magnificent header, and we all know Drogba's header as well was just, that's one of the greatest headed goals of all time.
Honestly, is slightly underrated as a goal.
Yeah,
it's so much to do when the ball came onto his forehead. Yeah. So much to do.
Okay, so let's do very quickly here, mini power rankings of Champions League final headers. So like I can pick two straight away: Gerrard and Messi.
Messi, yeah.
Gerrard's very good.
Gerrard, there's something about a Champions League final in the many distant past that contain amazing headed goals.
Messi's kind of rated because it's Messi and he's small and that's not his thing to do.
So it was an impressive header.
Gerrard's was very good because it wasn't the best cross. Was it Smeetser who crossed it in?
I think
or
so.
Risa maybe? But he was a far way out. But Drogba, the ball came to him from Juan Mata's corner at pace. He was facing directly towards Mata. You often see those headers where the centre forward accidentally heads it from where it came from and it goes out for an embarrassingly wide goal kick, possible throw-in.
Yeah.
So he had to twist his head, generate the power, beat the best goalkeeper in the world, and he lost a brilliant marker in Boateng all in the process.
Yeah.
And obviously his last game for Chelsea was in his first spell. He should have left it at that, by the way. I don't know why he came back.
Yeah.
But it was an amazing moment. Unbelievable moment. And actually, speaking of the commentary for ITV, Clive Tilsley that night summed up the dominance. After 25 minutes, Neuer got the ball for the first time, and he said, what did he say? Manuel Neuer is watching the final with the rest of us, because he hoofed the ball up long.
Great line.
Like, it's so true.
Most jarring, for me, I'm going to kick this off. Wide wingers. Just wingers who hug the touchline in Robin and Ribery sometimes. It's like I felt like the game was existing a lot more near the touchline than it does at the moment, where I know we've kind of got used to a Manchester City style of play where the wingers they don't need to cut in because they're quite inverted anyway, and that it's perhaps your full back doing the work quite a bit. Same with Liverpool, and maybe I'm just judging it in this little sphere of Premier League obsession we have in terms of how we watch football. But certainly for me, it kind of felt a little bit different watching the two boys just going down the wings, and if not, going for the same wing, hammering the same wing. So again, just I don't want to call it traditional because it's 2012, it's only 8 years ago, but that's something that stuck out to me as something that was a bit jarring. Also, Solomon Kalu's hairstyle. If that doesn't jar with you,
at the back.
Scorpion. The worst haircut ever in a Champions League final. That we can all agree on, I think.
I have to think about that now, yeah.
I'll go
Champions League haircuts.
my most jarring. was having they still had the officials in the byline behind the goal. The ones that did nothing.
Did I? I completely missed it.
Yeah, but that's because you wouldn't miss it because they were doing nothing. And I was watching it last night being like, just get out because I know what future it is for you and you're not going to be there. You're not going to be there now. See, this is the thing about, because it was only 8 years ago, but it was also 8 years ago. So much has changed in like smaller detail. But
You've got your static hoardings as well.
I was after we were talking about for one of the other classic games club, we were talking about Arsenal Manchester United, the tunnel match in 2005, and I think for me was the stationary advertising boards on the side.
Okay,
the old Lucas Aid banner. But this one was in the transition, and that's what I mean by it was only 8 years ago, but it was 8 years ago. In that I think a few of them moved. There were a few electronic boards, but there was certainly like FIFA.com, for example, was definitely stationary for the whole 120 minutes plus penalties.
Right, okay, so there was slow moving advertising hoardings. We were in a brave new era. What have you got for most jarring?
Fullbacks who stay in their positions.
Jeez,
because there wasn't...
That's the nature of the wingers, though, ahead of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably does feed into your one as well.
More defined positions, though, definitely,
Yeah, it's just that, Ashley Cole and Bosingwa especially were just... They were fullbacks. They stayed back. They marked the wingers. Whereas nowadays it is the trend now, isn't it?
They look after the width while your forwards look after the channels almost.
Yeah.
I'd agree with you on that. Right, reaction then in terms of what kind of came immediately afterwards. We mentioned essentially Roberto Di Matteo getting sacked later on in the year. The one I've already mentioned, the reaction obviously came to John Terry, one of the first real football memes. Here's something to float with you. Is this the last properly pragmatic team to have won the Champions League?
I'd argue the Real Madrid side was...
See, that's what
pragmatic.
I was thinking.
Yeah.
The one that won in 14,
that's good
16 and 17.
Not on this level, though. Like,
no,
Real
but I
Madrid
mean, the
pragmatism
was enforced onto Chelsea because they had to play Ryan Bertrand. They had to think on their feet. Now, Di Matteo could have played Malouda, but he went for the double fullback essentially in Cole and Bertrand. It's incredibly pragmatic because he was up against, as you say, out and out wingers against Bayern Munich in Robin and Ribery, and you can't really think of players like that nowadays. It was incredibly pragmatic. And also I just wanted to add to Steve's point there is that it was mad seeing players having such defined positions, because nowadays, if you want to use the example of the Liverpool front three, what position is Mo Salah?
Yeah,
forward.
Yeah,
Mane's forward, Firmino's forward, and everyone. It's so flexible now and interchangeable. And I guess that was incredibly pragmatic from Chelsea's point of view, because everybody seemed to stay in their exact positions where the lineup was showed before kickoff. Every time you saw Chelsea without the ball, which is the vast majority of the match, they were in the positions that UEFA showed as the team to start the match. You have to give Di Matteo huge credit for that. For a guy who went on to get sacked soon after, take a year out of football, take the Schalke job, last for 6 months, leave, take another year out, get the Aston Villa job, a few months left.
I'd wonder though as well, because you hear so many times, well, not so many, there are occasions in many different sports in team sports where sometimes there's almost a player takeover, and I think there was enough experience in that dressing room as well between the likes of Terry, Lampard and Drogba, where the manager, I'm not sure how much influence Di Matteo had on that team. Fair enough, he might have picked it, he might have told them this, that and the other, but I would imagine there was a fair bit of player control with regards to what happened in the closing part of Chelsea's season. That season they of course beat Liverpool in the FA Cup final as well.
Like, you can see Lampard managing the team on the pitch.
Absolutely,
in this game,
and even Terry in the stands, there were moments they went to him. It just, you kind of got the feeling that there was something going on there. Drogba as well, and that actually, just to bring me on to you were talking about the post-match stuff. I'm a bit of a softie. When I was a kid, I cried at Lassie films, the champ, all that kind of stuff. And I've no deep love for Chelsea. I can kind of take them or leave them as a club. And the Abramovich thing, I thought I've always sullied it for me a little bit. But when Drogba scored that winning penalty and he wheels away, and you can see the emotion in his face. And I have to say, I was watching that this morning, and I don't know if it was because I'm feeling a little bit tired, but I started welling up a bit myself, even watching it.
I like that.
6-7 years later. It was like such an emotional moment. It really was. It was kind of, the money kind of melted away into the background, and all of a sudden we just saw the rawness there of how much it meant to Drogba, his last ever game, and he just couldn't. And it was actually, it's a shame he got buried under that pylon, because I would imagine he was just probably in floods at that stage.
The tenacity it took from him as well to just live in the periphery for the entire 120 minutes and just strike once or twice. It was class.
Yeah.
That's that. Just one of the penultimate things then really is the sliding doors element of all of this. It's not, I think you can overstate what this does, because it's kind of like one of the last great moments of this Chelsea team. Like, if Chelsea don't win this Champions League final, do we reflect on them differently? I'm not sure we do, actually. I think we associate that Chelsea era with Jose Mourinho quite a bit, and the peak was before this. Let's face that. But what this is for the legacy of Roman Abramovich, and then for the likes of Frank Lampard, I think it is significant, and I think that you basically have checked it all off as a club at that point, as a player for a club at that point. And then, of course, you have the legacy of John Terry, who do we take him less seriously as a result of what happened on that very day, or is that overstating once again the moment of the match?
I suppose you could say the jury is out for John Terry in terms of his antics, but the longer goes by since his retirement, you realise he was such a brilliant player. So I think everyone takes his actual ability seriously. That was Chelsea have basically gone slowly downhill since then. I mean, they won the Europa League the following season when Rafa Benitez was manager, which is the most underwhelming following to the Champions League.
Did they beat Bayern in the Super Cup?
No, they lost Atletico Madrid in the Super Cup. They got hammered. Falcao inspired Atletico in the Super Cup.
Sorry, you're right.
And they lost the Community Shield to Man City. So it was definitely the peak.
No, I mean the Super Cup after they won the Europa League, because they would have played Bayern again.
They might have won. Yeah, they might have won.
I don't know.
Yeah, I can't remember that one actually. I remember Falcao destroying them in the 2012 Super Cup. It was a sliding doors in terms of that was the peak for Abramovich, because the first decade of his ownership was littered with success, as you say, dominated by Mourinho. And I know they won 2 league titles after the Champions League in 2012 under Mourinho and Conte, but I think Chelsea were so disliked at that time, but it was a backs against the wall job, because they had to make do with what they had, encapsulated by the manager who they had. Like Steve was saying, they probably didn't have much tactical influence, Di Matteo, on what happened there, but he was a good cheerleader, which is probably all the players needed. Like the night before the final, he kind of a masterstroke on his part, probably only a masterstroke because they won, of course, but a masterstroke was getting all family and friends of the players to make speeches in front of all the players, which was very emotional setting. Now, I know that Ronan O'Gara talks about how Munster did that before their first European Cup final, which they lost, and he said that was a bad thing because all the emotion was drained. They went around the room and they were asked, what would it mean for you to win this? And by the time they went out for the match next day, they were emotionally drained. But this had the opposite effect in that Chelsea team in 2012, in that it inspired them completely. So Di Matteo, I'd give credit for him for that. But those Chelsea players just wanted to change, because AVB in the last 16 first leg against Napoli dropped Lampard and dropped Ashley Cole, and the players just wanted out. They just wanted to get rid of him. So they had a huge influence in saying, in terms of sliding doors, it just went downhill after that. But that's not a bad hill to go down from.
Absolutely.
And for Bayern, Jupp Heynckes, it went the other way, because the next year they win the European Cup, and maybe the whole defeat on their own patch might have given them that motivation. Well, I'm sure it did. I'm sure all they had to do was think about the pain that they felt the previous season, and that was a huge motivation for them the following year.
They improved. They got Dante in at centre half. They got Mario Mandzukic in up front.
Very underrated player, I always say, Mandzukic.
Yeah, and Javi Martinez came from Athletic Bilbao in midfield. I think he's still there. So it was they had slightly upgraded everything, a bit like Liverpool did a couple of years ago when they brought in Alisson and Van Dijk. I mean, there's obviously much more of an effect there, but there's the slight upgrades, and then they go from winning nothing in 2012 to winning everything in 2013 with those little tweaks.
Is the match overrated or underrated?
I think it's a little bit overrated, if I'm being honest. I think when you watch the first 90 minutes, it's fascinating watching Bayern Munich kind of having a go at Chelsea really for that opening 30-35 minutes before Chelsea start coming into the game. But it's a lack of quality from Bayern Munich that means that they don't get the goal. They
lack of finishing quality.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I think because what happens because we get the Muller goal 83 minutes, the Didier Drogba equaliser late on, then extra time is it's so tense, and are we going to get that? And the penalty shootout is magnificent to watch as well. So I think the last 40 minutes, as in the last 10 minutes of normal time, extra time and the penalties, is amazing. It's drama at its best in sport, but I think everything that came before it, not great for me.
I'm with you on that, exactly. Except, if anybody wants to go back and watch it, just watching until before it goes 1-0 to Bayern Munich, and then enjoy the rest of it. And it's all underrated from that point on. John Terry, still underrated, still fantastic when you watch it in full, just to see him pop up on occasion As a whole, though, I'm going for overrated.
It's perfectly rated. It's not overrated. It's not.
I saw this go down as like one of
not.
the best Champions League finals ever.
We're only discussing this. This is only included in the Classic Games Club because of the last 10 minutes of normal time onwards. Let's be honest, the first 80 minutes was pretty drab as a final. But the reason it's perfectly rated for me is, it's what a Champions League final should be. Champions League final, you're never going to watch the best football, but it was so tense for the whole game, and you could feel it. I was watching it last night, comparing it to, say, last season's Europa League final between Arsenal and Chelsea, which felt like a pre-season tournament. There was no intensity to the game at all.
Yeah,
and
shocking.
you're looking at this game in 2012, and it's the tension. I mean, I'm a Man United fan. I don't care who wins that match.
But even Spurs
But
Liverpool
I'm
last season.
But I don't think that was a great final.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, because it was done after 5 minutes, really, and
they were
Spurs
lacking
lost belief.
something.
And I watched that in the pub too, so that was grand. But you can chat away. But the Bayern Chelsea game. Actually, I do have a point with that pub talk, because the Bayern Chelsea game in the pub that night, bear in mind that's 2 hours of football plus the penalty shootout. By the end of that match, there were people who had absolutely no interest in football watching the TV.
And they were also
that, for
absolutely pissed, I'd say.
Yeah, but I mean, it's all part of it.
It's all part of it.
Yeah. So I think it's perfectly rated.
Pub
I don't
made
think
a
it's
killing off
underrated.
you.
I think it's perfectly
I
rated.
think if you I'm trying to think of the second bloody Batman film in the trilogy.
The Dark Knight.
The Dark Knight. I think if you had the soundtrack from that film over that game, it would be perfect.
It's a good shout, actually. We might actually do that to spend my evening tonight.
The Dark Knight, right, when the Joker isn't in it, is an average movie. Yeah.
Well, sorry, Dark Knight. I would agree with that.
Is that the one with
It's
Joker?
Heath Ledger,
Yeah.
Nice segue from Classic Game Club into Classic Film Club there.
It's a segue into our new show.
But it's not a bad take, to be honest. It's all about the acting. It's all about Heath Ledger. And then, same with the current Joker. I know it is literally, he is the main character, but obviously if you take the main character out of any movie, it's going to be shite, but still.
The Dark Knight, he's not the main character.
Yeah,
and when he's not in that movie,
Just
it's
as
a
if-
by-the-numbers film.
If you take John Terry out of that final, it would have been rubbish.
Absolutely, he makes it. He arrives just at the end. Quite a twist. Right, that is Chelsea against Bayern Munich. This has been the Classic Game Club. Steve-O, Cullum, thanks for popping in. You can find Cullum
Cheers,
in, what's the name of the pub?
The Old Oak.
Find him there in June for
Bunker
Champions
Street
League
in
final. Whatever it's going to be, Liverpool
Twickenham.
against Barcelona or something like that. Next week, turning our attention to rugby. I think we're going to do Brian O'Driscoll's hat-trick 20 years on from the Paris game between Ireland and France, the real arrival of O'Driscoll. We'll chat to you then. Make sure to actually check back all the previous episodes, youtube.com/offtheball. We'll chat to you next time on Classic Game Club.